One of the biggest time killers you have when you're working on some older car is rusty bolts. I know this from experience from many years ago too, but one of the best, you don't need an acetylene, you can use propane, and you can also use penetrating oil. J.C. Penney, right? This is some old stuff, but I had it. I have a lot of different things laying around, but any kind. And if you don't have penetrating oil, you can use acetone and transmission fluid mixture. And but the heat works the best. You don't need an acetylene. I like this because it's a lot safer than acetylene. You're not going to make the steel too hot where it's not going to work. Now I snapped one of these off because it was turning and it might have been rusty like inside here, and it snapped off. I should get new bolts for this thing. But there's another method I'm going to use after I show you with the heat, is you can use these extractors. And what it uses is not ordinary drill bits. It uses reverse drill bits. Instead of the drill bits going clockwise, they go counterclockwise. Now, a lot of times, where the bolt is holding is not only where the threads are, but if it's screwed in, it's the head of the bolt that's against the metal. So, when you actually use the extractor, sometimes if you know, it's not always, but sometimes when the actual head of the bolt is actually off, you can actually take it out, because it's only the threads that are holding it, because there could be torque where this is torqued on here, and that's what's holding it too. I mean, there obviously are torqued on, and it's not all the rusty threads that are doing the job, but 99% of the time this works, and I like using this a lot better than acetylene, because you're not going to you know, foul it up with too much heat. And of course it worked like a charm. The came off like butter. It's almost out, and you know, you got to apply a lot of heat. You can see how rusty it is. It's quite rusty. Now this one here, if you got some threads you can grip on with the vice grips, that's the way you want to do it. You know, this I'm going to probably try with the vice grips first, but obviously I'll be able to get it out with heat and using the extractor. So all you got to do is drill a hole in there and it'll pull it right out. Now, to give you a good idea how long this stuff lasts, I used to been using this thing off and on for some years. Actually, this thing is 35 years old and it never leaked. How's that? So I got a new one over here that's 35 years old, and I'm going to install this on it, put some Teflon tape. I'm going to screw it on there and see if it works. And it's got stuff in it, so you know what? To tell you the truth, if you buy this stuff and you think you're never going to need it, it ain't much money. It's highly useful for a lot of things. Say you want to start a fire or something like that, you got to use something. It is a lot better than a match, man. You got a sparker and you got to start some wood up on fire. There you go. And I'm just saying that this is about 35 to 40 years old, and it was in plastic, but it's a little rusty, but I bet you it works. This thing is about 35, 40 years old, and I used to take it out occasionally and use it every once in a while. I just used it up. It's like the end of it, so I'm going to replace it and put a new one on there. Got some Teflon tape on there, and I'll screw it on. Okay, here you got almost 40-year-old propane in action. Works. How's that? Just shut it off. It still seals. I just want to point that out because you can keep this stuff a hell of a long time and it's still good. I had to actually put a little lubricant on there to make it work. Now the thing is, I'm going to give a quick demonstration, I think, of how to use the extractor on this, but it's probably not going to be necessary because I can see the threads of the bolts and get it out with the vice grips. But well, many times you're going to need these extractors for some things if you're working on old cars, and the whole thing is to take your time. A lot of times if you put some penetrating oil on there, another one out there is really good is Kroil, K-R-O-I-L. I used to use that stuff sometimes. I don't have any, but you got to like leave it on there. Like if you're working on a really old car, and put that stuff on everything and then just let it sit. You work on a piece at a time, and it'll work into the bolt and it'll fix it, no problem. Well, the heat worked like a charm. This bolt was actually really stuck in there pretty damn good, and I couldn't get it out budget at all with the vice grips or penetrating oil or anything. I just pass it on this tip because I found out by trial and error. I heard so much BS about taking out rusty bolts, but just all you need is this, and this stuff is good to keep around because it's it lasts a long time, and if you ever need to even start a fire or anything like that, you just need a sparker like this, and it's a propane. You could start anything. You don't need any kindling, right? But it works great for taking off bolts. Now, if you had to use the easy outs, you don't really need the reverse drill bits. You don't actually need them, but they're good because a lot of times, and you notice I mean by reverse drill bits, when you got this going backwards, right? It's going counterclockwise. So you're drilling out the opposite way versus like tight. So when you're drilling out the opposite way, you're loosening the bolt. So a lot of times, even when you're using the drill in there and you're drilling it, it may actually come out by itself, because when you're tapping in the center of the bolt, it's relieving some torque and stress on the threads. So a lot of times, just the drill alone, sometimes will, not a lot of times, but sometimes it'll actually keep the bolt out. Now, if you drill off the whole head of the bolt, that's not a problem either sometimes, because it's like if you're looking at the head of this bolt, it's torqued on there, plus there's rust on the head of the bolt. Sometimes when you drill off the head of the bolt, you can get the threaded portion out easier. So what you might want to try is two different ways. Is first trying to do a tiny hole, see if you can get it out, and then try a little bit bigger hole, because if you take the head of the bolt off, sometimes it makes it easier. And the other thing is, when you're using these extractors, you could use vice grips and kind of just hold the extractor with the vice grips and use it that way. But I have a T handle. It didn't come with this set. It came with my tap and die sets, and you want to hold it like this and work it back and forth and take your time. Taking your time with this stuff actually saves you time. You don't want to go ahead and rush anything, because when you rush, it actually takes you more time than anything. And this is the #1 problem with working on anything that's old. All the bolts are rusty, but the heat works excellent. It does work excellent. And like I said again, you're better off with the propane because you can't melt the steel. Acetylene works, but you gotta watch with that stuff. You can overheat the metal. The propane never overheats the metal. Oh, one more tip: if you use Loctite red, not blue, you can get when you use Loctite on bolts. Like if you're using Loctite blue, you can get them off. Loctite red, you're supposed to that's supposed to be a permanent installation. The way to take off Loctite red is heat. So actually, you can use Loctite red in a lot of applications where it's not supposed to be, because if you want to make sure it stays on there, just remember though, if you got to get that bolt off, you're going to have to use heat. If you use some heat like this stuff, which won't melt steel, this is the perfect stuff for using with Loctite red when you got to take it off. It doesn't screw up the metal, but it will cause the Loctite red to release. So I'm trying to throw that tip in there too.